The sound of a basketball bouncing outside my window was the first real noise that interrupted the silence I had been living in for a year. It was rhythmic, steady, almost hypnotic. I stood by the kitchen sink, my hands gripping the edges of the counter, staring at the untouched cup of coffee in front of me. The loneliness had settled in my bones since my husband, Mark, passed away. At first, people surrounded me, friends bringing food, neighbors checking in, but as time passed, life moved on for them. For me, it stood still. The house felt too big, too quiet. I often found myself sitting in the living room, staring at the empty chair where Mark used to read his newspaper. That's when I first noticed Jake. He was my neighbor's son, 19 years old, full of energy and life. He had always been polite, always offered a wave when he saw me outside. But lately, I had been watching him more than I should. He spent hours in his driveway, practicing basketball, his muscles tensing and flexing with each movement. He reminded me of youth, of the time when Mark and I were carefree, before the weight of life settled in. I scolded myself for staring. He was just a boy, well, not quite a boy anymore. But I was a woman who had buried her husband. I had no business watching him like that. One afternoon, I was taking the trash out when I heard his voice. "Hey, Mrs. Thompson." I turned, and there he was, wiping sweat from his forehead with the hem of his shirt, revealing just enough of his toned stomach to make me quickly look away. "Hi, Jake," I replied, forcing a smile. "You okay? Haven't seen you around much." His eyes were warm, concerned even. "I'm fine," I lied. "Just keeping busy." He nodded, then glanced at the loose gutter hanging from the side of my porch. "Looks like you need some help with that. I can fix it for you if you want." I hesitated. I should have said no. But the truth was, I hadn't had a real conversation in days, and the idea of anyone, staying a little longer made me agree too quickly. "That would be great. Thank you, Jake." Minutes later, he was standing on a ladder, securing the gutter while I stood below, pretending not to admire how easily he handled the task. "You live alone now, right?" he asked casually. I swallowed, nodding. "Yeah, it's just me now." He glanced down, his expression thoughtful. "Must be tough." I let out a small breath. Some days more than others. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us felt different from the usual emptiness in my house, warmer, somehow. Then, Jake grinned and climbed down the ladder. "Well, if you ever need anything, just ask. I'm happy to help." I should have left it at that. I should have thanked him and walked away. But something inside me, something that had been asleep for too long, stirred. "Actually," I said before I could stop myself, "the light in my hallway has been flickering. If you don't mind." His smile widened. "Of course. Lead the way." As we stepped inside, I felt it, the shift, the unspoken tension. Maybe it was in my head, or maybe it was real. Either way, I ignored it. After all, what harm could a little company do? Want to know what happens next? Like and subscribe for more emotionally gripping tales that explore the complexities of human relationships. Jake's visits became more frequent after that day. At first, it was innocent. He'd stop by to help with little things around the house. Fixing a cabinet door, replacing a light bulb, even carrying heavy groceries inside when he saw me struggling. But soon, it wasn't just about fixing things anymore. He started staying longer, sitting at my kitchen table, drinking iced tea while we talked. I learned more about him, how he had just finished high school, how he wasn't sure if college was the right choice. He talked about basketball, his friends, his dreams. And I talked too, about my life before Mark, about how the house felt too big and too quiet now. He listened in a way that made me feel seen, like I wasn't just a widow to him. I told myself it was harmless. But I knew better. One evening, just before sunset, Jake knocked on my door. "I was in the driveway and saw your porch light flickering again," he said with a grin. "Need me to take a look?" I laughed softly. "You know, if I didn't know better, I'd say you keep looking for excuses to come over." His smile faltered, just for a second, and in that moment, something passed between us. A hesitation and awareness. Then he smirked. "Maybe I do." I should have ended it there. I should have told him it was getting late, that I didn't need any more favors. But I stepped aside and let him in. As he checked the wiring, I busied myself in the kitchen, pretending everything was normal. But my hands shook slightly as I poured 2 glasses of iced tea. When I turned, he was standing in the doorway, watching me. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded too quickly. "Of course. Why wouldn't I be?" He tilted his head, studying me. "I don't know. You seem different when I'm around." I swallowed hard. "You're imagining things." He took a slow step closer. "Am I?" I forced a laugh, shaking my head. "Jake, this is ridiculous." But he didn't move. "Is it?" His voice was quiet, careful. "Because I think about you, Mrs. Thompson, more than I should." I closed my eyes for a second, willing my pulse to slow. "Jake, we can't." "I know," he said quickly. "I know. But I don't care." The room felt too small, the air too heavy. Every part of me screamed to stop this before it went too far. Then, a loud clap of thunder shook the house. Jake glanced at the window, where raindrops had started pelting against the glass. "Guess I should head home before it gets worse," he said, but he didn't move. Lightning flashed, followed by another crash of thunder. The rain poured harder. "Or," he said, "I could stay until it lets up." My breath caught. I should have told him to leave. I should have ended this right then and there. But instead, I handed him a glass of iced tea, and we sat in the living room as the storm raged outside. We talked about nothing and everything. I watched the way his fingers wrapped around the glass, the way his eyes lingered on me too long. I should have been afraid of what we were doing, of what we were becoming. But I wasn't. I felt alive. If you're drawn into this complex story of love and temptation, make sure to like and subscribe for more engaging narratives filled with emotion and suspense. The first mistake was letting him in that night. The second was not stopping him when his hand brushed against mine as we reached for the same glass. It was such a small thing, innocent enough. But the way he looked at me, like he was waiting for permission, made my breath catch. I didn't pull away. After that stormy night, everything changed. Jake started coming over more often, but it wasn't just to fix things anymore. Sometimes he had no excuse at all, just a knock on my door and a simple, "Can I come in?" And every time I let him. We talked for hours about nothing and everything. He made me laugh in a way I hadn't in years. And when he looked at me, I felt something I hadn't felt since before Mark got sick. Wanted. But it was dangerous. I knew that the moment I almost got caught. It was a warm Saturday afternoon, and I had just finished making lemonade when I heard a knock. I opened the door to find Jake, smiling like always. "Thirsty?" I asked, lifting the pitcher in my hand. He grinned. "Always." I let him in, closing the door behind us. He followed me into the kitchen, leaning against the counter as I poured 2 glasses. That's when it happened. A shadow passed by the kitchen window. "Mrs. Thompson?" My stomach dropped. It was Karen, my next-door neighbor, the one who always had a little too much interest in other people's business. Jake froze. I forced a smile, stepping toward the window. "Hi, Karen. Didn't hear you come up." She peered inside, her sharp eyes scanning the kitchen before landing on Jake. Her lips pressed together. "Didn't realize you had company." My heart pounded. "Oh, Jake was just helping me with," I scrambled for an excuse, "the air conditioner. It's been acting up." Karen raised an eyebrow, clearly suspicious. "I see." Silence stretched between us. I forced another smile. "Did you need something?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "Just checking in. It's been a while since we talked." I nodded quickly. "Of course. Let's catch up soon." She didn't look convinced, but after another glance at Jake, she finally turned and walked away. The moment she was gone, I exhaled, pressing a hand to my chest. Jake smirked. "That was close." I shot him a glare. "This isn't funny." He shrugged. "Kinda is." I shook my head. "We need to be more careful." His smile faded. "Do you want me to stop coming over?" I opened my mouth to say yes. That would have been the right answer. The safe answer. But instead, I whispered no. Jake stepped closer, his voice low. "Then tell me what you want." My pulse raced. I didn't have an answer, Not one I could say out loud. All I knew was that every time he left, I counted the minutes until he came back. And that was the most dangerous part of all. The weight of our secret was getting heavier. At first, it was easy to ignore. The stolen moments, the lingering glances, the way my heart raced whenever I heard a knock at the door. But as the weeks passed, the reality of what we were doing started creeping in. It wasn't just a harmless connection anymore. It was something deeper, something I couldn't control. And someone was bound to notice. One evening, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jake was sitting at my kitchen table, spinning his glass of iced tea between his fingers. "You ever think about leaving this place?" he asked. I blinked. "What do you mean?" He shrugged. "I don't know. Just starting over. Somewhere no one knows you. No past, no expectations." I sighed. "It's not that simple, Jake." He looked at me then, really looked at me. "Maybe it is." Before I could answer, the front doorknob rattled. I froze. Jake's eyes widened. Then, knocking. "Mom?" A familiar voice called from the other side. My heart nearly stopped. It was my son. Panic surged through me. "Go. Now," I whispered. Jake didn't hesitate. He moved fast, slipping out the back door just as I unlocked the front. I forced a smile as I pulled it open. "Daniel." What a surprise. My son stepped inside, frowning slightly. "Were you talking to someone?" My stomach clenched. "No, just the TV." He glanced toward the kitchen, and I held my breath. There were 2 glasses on the table. His eyes flickered back to me, but he didn't say anything. I quickly moved past him, pretending to tidy up. "What brings you by?" Daniel hesitated, then sighed. "I just wanted to check on you." I smiled, hoping he didn't see how unsteady I felt. "I appreciate that." We made small talk for a while, but I barely heard a word. My heart was still racing, my hands still shaking. When he finally left, I collapsed into a chair, exhaling shakily. This was getting too close. Too dangerous. That night, Jake texted me. Did he suspect anything? I stared at the message, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Then I typed, "We can't keep doing this." A few minutes later, a reply, "Can I see you one last time?" I should have said no. Instead, I found myself standing at my back door an hour later, waiting. When he arrived, he looked different, more serious, more certain. "I don't want this to be over," he said softly. I swallowed hard. "It has to be." He stepped closer. "Why? Because people will talk? Because it's complicated?" I sighed. "Because it's not fair to you." Jake frowned. "You're the only person who makes me feel like I matter." His words hit me harder than I expected. Because that's exactly how he made me feel, too. But this wasn't a fairy tale. "It has to end," I whispered. "Before we lose control." Silence stretched between us. Then, finally, he nodded. "Okay." Neither of us moved right away. It was like standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing you had to jump, but still afraid of the fall. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. I watched until he disappeared into the night, my chest aching in a way I couldn't describe. I had made the right choice. So why did it feel so wrong? If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, don't forget to like and subscribe for more emotionally gripping tales that explore the complexities of human relationships.